It's Joshua Vigar from Android Authority. What's going on, everybody? Let's take a quick look back at the Xperia Z. It holds on its shoulders the hope that Sony becomes not only more relevant in the smartphone market, but one of the top manufacturers in the game. In my review of this pretty spectacular phone, I said that Sony got a lot of things right. So, what we are doing here is comparing the Xperia Z to a couple of other phones that helped propel their respective companies higher than they already were, the best-selling Samsung Galaxy S3 and the iPhone 5 by Apple. How does the Xperia Z as the newest device stack up against a couple phones that were honestly built to stand the test of time? Let's find out in this versus Triple Threat. We start off by looking at design. There is no other way around it. The Xperia Z is the biggest phone in this bunch. The black slate look is further enhanced by the completely flat design found all around and the rectangular shape that you honestly don't see enough of anymore. The big power button and volume rockers are found together on the right side of the phone, right where your thumb would land. All ports are covered by a tethered piece of material to help with the phone's water resistance, and it also keeps it quite literally flat all around. The glass all around helps make this one of our favorite looking phones, but it is an incredible fingerprint magnet. Samsung's Galaxy S3 has arguably the most endearing design to date, as many phones have been modeled after the phone giant's more rounded look. The 4.8-inch screen lends itself to a smaller form factor that is easier to grip. The button layouts are signature Samsung, with the power button on the right side opposite the volume rockers. The home button below the screen is flanked by menu and back buttons. The back cover is removable, but it and the rest of the body are made up of that trademark plastic that Samsung has pretty much put in all of their phones since. And with the iPhone 5, we have the smallest phone of this comparison. Apple took a stand against large screens and kept the one on the 5 the same width as the 4, just a little bit taller. The smaller size does make this the easiest phone to grip and hold without needing to adjust too often. The buttons are signature Apple, with the power button at the top, with the volume buttons and the silence toggle on the left. The trademark home button is on the face below the screen. The aluminum unibody is definitely a tried and true design for Apple that has been deserving of praise. At the bottom is the controversial charging port, however, that did cause a few headaches for those with original iPhone accessories. Ultimately, I have to give the design point to the Xperia Z, primarily because it brings us a design that we haven't seen in a while, if at all. Everything these days is so rounded in the smartphone market, and honestly, I prefer this more rigid rectangular design. On top of all of that, Samsung has taken the plastic feel and look of the Samsung Galaxy S3 and has put it in pretty much all of their phones since. It's a design that honestly we're getting a little bit tired of, and as with the iPhone 5, it's basically the iPhone 4 just a little bit bigger. I give props to the Xperia Z for giving us something new. That all being said, however, when it comes to the point for feel, I have to give the second point in this comparison to the Samsung Galaxy S3. Yes, the Xperia Z is a wonderful looker, and its larger screen size gives us a lot to be happy about, but it isn't something we're completely used to yet. 2013 is the year of the 1080p screen, but any newcomers to that particular market will find a learning curve. Before you think I'm just picking on the iPhone, however, I do have to say that having a 4.7-inch phone for a while now has made me used to it. Now when I pick up an iPhone, it just seems way too small, and it feels really foreign and weird. Thus, the comfort and feel point does have to end up going to the tried and true design of the Galaxy S3. The battle for the display might seem like an uphill battle, and that is kind of true. The screen on the Xperia Z is, after all, what we're going to be seeing more of in the coming months. 5 inches and 1080p resolution. The 441 ppi pixel density also helps propel the screen to great heights in sharpness. A nice touch further is the high refresh rate, which makes this phone seem like a tiny Bravia television. The only real gripe here is the color production, which is unfortunately pretty poor for a top-tier device. Colors look a little washed out and are further hurt by the viewing angles. It might not be a deal breaker for many, but it is definitely worth a mention. The Super AMOLED display of the Galaxy S3, on the other hand, makes its already colorful TouchWiz UI pop out of the screen and basically punch you in the face. The smaller screen makes for a 720 resolution instead, and a pretty low 306 ppi pixel density. Thus, things aren't necessarily as sharp as the Xperia Z, but they're still quite viewable. Though the specs are a little bit low, the practice on this display is still ultimately pretty great, and most users these days will still be very happy with the display found on the Galaxy S3. The iPhone continues its smaller stature role by having the 4-inch display capable of 1136 by 640 resolution, and in this case, the medium level to 326 ppi pixel density. It is a very good display for its size, and it does hold its own with good color production and decent sharpness. This is actually Apple's greatest display on any of their phones, and it does deserve that praise. Now, I have been getting to know the 5-inch display phones quite well, and to be honest, I get it now. 1080p displays do a great job of making media even better than on smaller screens or lower resolution displays, or God forbid both. The Xperia Z screen is an example of our future as smartphone users. Even if the screen does have some lackluster color vibrancy, I have to admit it is still the most enjoyable time of this bunch for me, so it gets the point in display. In terms of performance, the Xperia Z has the advantage of being the newest phone. It sports the incredible quad-core 1.5 GHz Snapdragon S4 Pro processor backed by an Adreno 320 GPU, a set that powers current top devices. It gets over 20,000 in Antutu benchmark, which is very impressive indeed. The Galaxy S3, on the other hand, has the Exynos Cortex A9 processor that clocks at 1.4 GHz with a Mali 400MP graphics processor. This was the most advanced phone about half a year ago, but even if it has been blown away by current offerings, it still does hold its ground as a more than capable performer. And finally, we have the iPhone 5 with an in-house developed dual-core 1.2 GHz A6 processor backed by a PowerVR SGX graphics processor. It is a package that has been able to power some of the best that the Apple App Store has had to offer, and that is a feat in and of itself. Some good optimization and control by Apple's part makes this phone still seem as sprightly as the day it was first released. Though practice means more than scores, you just can't deny how much the Xperia Z excels. All the great scores it has been putting out definitely translate into usage, so it gets the point for great performance in this round. When we look at hardware, we look primarily at extras. Now, two features that many top-tier devices have been lacking as of late are removable batteries and expandable memory. While the unibody design of the Xperia Z does keep the battery fixed, one of the many covered ports is indeed the SD card slot. NFC and the rest of the connectivity bevy are still available here as well. The Samsung Galaxy S3 has a removable back cover, however, which allows full access to both the battery and the SD card slot, just part of all the things that it did get right at release. NFC in this case takes the form of S-Beam in the S3, and it was a very well marketed feature. And finally, the iPhone's signature aluminum body design keeps all of these bits from being available. There's no replaceable battery, no expandable memory, and also no NFC. So for all that it does, the Samsung Galaxy S3 gets the point for having everything our users crave from their top-tier devices. Some true differences are found in the software. The Sony Xperia Z sports Jelly Bean 4.1 and thus includes with its customized UI, Google Now. The inclusion of small apps makes multitasking even easier. Aside from all this, however, Sony has put in a few of their own touches. Generally, however, the Xperia UI here actually looks a lot like ice cream sandwich. The black and gray tones are accented by blue, by default, and the whole interface looks very simplistic while remaining functional. I find that you either love TouchWiz or hate it. It is one of the most colorful user interfaces for Android and sticks with rounded, almost bubbly design choices rather than the more rigid feel of other operating systems. Jelly Bean 4.1 is what you have here if you updated recently, so the great Google Now is also available. However, the feature that I want to mention here is Multi-View, which allows you to essentially cut the display in half for two different apps to run at the same time. It does take multitasking to a whole new level. And finally, we have iOS, which is only found on the iPhone. As one of the first truly advanced interfaces for mobile phones, it was quite the innovation. However, despite changes here and there through the years, the operating system essentially looks and works the same. There is no app drawer, and all apps are put on the home screens to be organized by folders. Only in the last couple iterations did Apple finally include the notification dropdown that lacks the power widgets found in the other two in this comparison. That all being said, however, the controlled app ecosystem does ensure that the general feel of iOS is pretty seamless. It has smooth transitions and generally continues to perform about as well as it did out of the box. Optimization in a system without fragmentation is one good advantage here. But I've never quite been a fan of the app-centric design of iOS. The lack of widgets and easy customization make iOS unappealing to me and to most Android users. If I had to pick one here, it would have to be the Xperia Z because of its simplistic design that does just enough to look good while remaining functional. And as far as multi-view goes, imagine how good that will look on a 5-inch 1080p display. And finally, we have the camera. The Xperia Z has the most megapixels in this bunch, with 13. It is definitely the biggest gun, and all those megapixels are, for the most part, used quite well. Pictures have a nice color reproduction and the details in photos are very good. Obviously, lighting takes a big role here, as it should for any photography. The Samsung Galaxy S3 with 8 megapixels, however, has largely the same kind of deal. Colors in this and the Xperia Z tend to take on a cooler tone, and the detail quality is still quite nice. But then you got the iPhone 5's camera, which takes on the obvious warm tones that you notice quite immediately. While detail is great across the board with these three cameras, this warmer tone that the iPhone gives just looks more pleasing and thus yields a more usable picture. I don't like how the iPhone 5 has very few options for tweaking the camera, as 16:9 ratio is more my style than the 4:3 that it will always do in the built-in camera app. Nonetheless, I am happy with the pictures from the Xperia Z and the Galaxy S3, but with the iPhone's camera, once used to film an entire independent film, mind you, it is definitely deserving of all of that praise. And so, there you have it. I have one point that I want to drive home here. While the Xperia Z did walk away with the most points, I look at these three phones and realize that the mere act of just picking one of these phones is really awesome. Here we have three phones with great specifications across the board for people to choose from. iPhone with the smaller screen is still one of the most capable smartphones in existence. The best-selling Galaxy S3 is the wonderfully built phone that continues to be marketed and sold for good reason. And the Xperia Z is the phone that might make Sony one of the biggest names in the smartphone market again. It is also the example here of the smartphones of our future, so it deserves its praise for being the most powerful and enjoyable of the bunch, at least for me in this comparison. So stay tuned to Android Authority because we have a lot coming in the following weeks, as we are your source for all things Android.